Good afternoon, and I'm very happy to be here and to have the opportunity to speak about two projects that we are working on. Saliba, I'm a PhD student in Nanterre, Paris, in France, but I'm a Lebanese psychomotor therapist. I come from Lebanon. So as we noticed throughout this great and fruitful day, mother voice and music in the neonatal intensive care is really an expanding field of interest. So what do we know about the effect of voices on preterm babies in the NICU? Two reviews to date have shown beneficial effects of exposure to maternal voice in the NICU. And also we have 11 published reviews to date that have shown beneficial effects on hospitalized preterm infants of music intervention. What are the effects of exposure to the NICU staff or other family members, like the father, the grandfather, the grandmother, on hospitalized preterm infant, whether directed to the infant or not? So this is our main question. So the primary purpose of this review is to scrutinize the literature on the effects of specifically of voices other than the mothers on preterm infants' clinical outcomes, short, medium, and long term. And also, a secondary aim is to identify the conditions of the potential benefits with regard to the type of voice used in the studies. Is it male or female, familiar, unfamiliar? And what is the support of the vocal stimulus? Is it live or recorded? And the type of stimulus, singing, reading, speaking, or talking. So what we did, a web-based search in article contents was conducted in the electronic databases of Medline, Embase, Cochrane, and PsychoInfo, especially by using the MASH and the combination of keywords related to vocal stimuli and preterm infants, and to ensure maximum sensitivity, no limits or filter were placed on the searches and no language restrictions were applied. Our study selections. Studies published prior to March 2016 were included if they met the following criteria. They should be empirical studies with methodological stance with clinical outcomes, children born preterm, intervention or stimulations occurred in the NICU only, and the main focus is on the effects of non-maternal voice on preterm infants, and the stimuli based on voice without accompanying instruments, so not without any musical instrument. And multimodal intervention were as well excluded. Now, regarding the results, as we can see on this flow diagram, we have a total of 11 studies were included in this review. And most of the studies were conducted after year 2000, 9 out of 11. The age of preterm infants, most of the studies included clinically stable premature infants. This is the gestational age at birth, and the age at enrollment was only reported in 3 studies out of 11. Now, regarding the outcomes, the reviewed studies focused mainly, as we noticed in the other reviews, on short-term outcomes, 8 out of 11. And the significant effects of vocal stimulation on at least one physiological parameter, as we can see here in this table. And most of the studies coverage in reporting a decrease in heart rate level and an increase in the oxygen saturation. So, and globally regarding the behavior, we can see that 3 studies studied the activity level, one the distressed behaviors, and one the episodes of crying. And mainly we noticed a reduction in distress and crying episodes, and an increase in time spent in the sleep states in infants exposed to human voices. We have 6 studies talking about the medium-term outcomes. 5 studied the growth and feeding, 2 the sleep quality, and 1 the length of stay. And there is only 1 study that studied the long-term outcome. And here we can see a higher 7 and 18 months corrected age Bailey score regarding the language and cognitive scores. So as we saw, its overall no negative effects were reported. However, the outcome measurements and the context of the measurement of the outcomes varied significantly across the studies. Now I will be talking a little bit about the setting description. It was very heterogeneous. 7 out of 11 used singing. Only 2 used speaking, and 2 compared singing and speaking. The delivery mode was mainly recorded, like Manuela also reported in the review about the mother voice. Only 3 were live, and 1 compared live and recorded. And finally, the delivery person was unfamiliar in most of the studies, in practically all the studies, and 4 used familiar studies, but the characteristic of the voice was not analyzed separately. So it was combined with the unfamiliar stimuli. So if we go back to our objective, conclusions regarding our second aim was very difficult, especially that the voice's characteristics were not systematically analyzed. So all these lead us to some conclusions regarding the outcomes. As we noticed, studies mainly focused on short or medium terms, so further research is clearly needed on long-term clinical and developmental outcomes. Also regarding the stimuli type, the challenge is to investigate the effects of NICU staff voices and all family members on preterm infants, not only mother and not only the music intervention. And finally, the methodology. The review findings outline the importance of addressing methodological challenges for future studies.